You know, there is a special kind of silence that falls over a courtroom when a judge truly realizes, that the plaintiff sitting in front of him has destroyed their own life. It isn't a loud silence. It's heavy, dense, like the air before a thunderstorm. I sat there, quietly watching my neighbor, let's call him Brad, turn a shade of pale usually reserved for dead fish. The judge was holding a piece of paper. My piece of paper. The one Brad had signed 3 years ago, demanding I build a wall to keep my, as he used to say, filthy runoff off his pristine lawn. Well, Brad, you got your wall. And now you also have a $2 million house that identifies as a submarine. Here is the story of how a little bit of hydrology, a lot of malicious compliance, and one very expensive retaining wall washed an entitled bully right out of the neighborhood. Welcome back to Stoic Verdict. We look at stories where competence meets karma. If you enjoy seeing the arrogant humbled by the very rules they try to weaponize, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We don't just read stories, we analyze the victory. Let's get into it. To understand this disaster, you have to understand the land. You see, gravity is the only law you can never break. I live in the Pacific Northwest. It rains here. A lot. We measure precipitation in feet, not inches. My property sits near the bottom of a long, gentle slope. It's a modest place, about 2 acres of second-growth forest and a house I built myself 10 years ago. It's not a mansion, but it's mine. For 50 years, there has been a natural drainage ditch, an easement technically, that runs along the back of my lot. It catches the rainwater from the properties above me and channels it safely to the creek below. It's not pretty. It's a ditch. It's filled with ferns, rocks, and mud. But it works. It is a masterpiece of natural engineering. Enter Brad. Brad bought the 3-acre lot directly uphill from me about 2 years ago. Brad was a developer. You know the type. The kind of guy who drives a pristine G-Wagon that has never seen a speck of dirt and wears loafers without socks in November. He didn't just buy the land to live on it. He bought it to dominate it. He tore down the modest cabin that was on the upper lot and started building what I can only describe as a modern farmhouse monstrosity. White shiplap, black trim, and a footprint so big it looked like an Amazon fulfillment center dropped into the middle of a forest. Now, I'm a civil engineer. I specialize in stormwater management. I know dirt. I know water. And I know that when you pave over 3 acres of absorbent forest with concrete patios, pool decks, and roof tiles, that water has to go somewhere. I walked up there one Saturday when I saw the excavators arriving. The air smelled like diesel and wet earth. I found Brad screaming at a contractor on his phone, his face turning a distinct shade of tomato red. I waited for him to finish. He spun around, looking at me like I was a smudge on his designer sunglasses. "Can I help you?" he asked, not helping at all. "Hi, I'm OP, from down the hill," I said, pointing toward my property. "I see you're grading the back lot. Just a heads up, there's a historic drainage easement back there. If you flatten that out, the water velocity coming down to my place is going to triple. You need to put in a retention pond or at least maintain the swale." Brad laughed, a short, barking laugh. It was the laugh of a man who has never been told no in his entire adult life. "Look, buddy," he said, stepping closer. "This is my land. I paid a premium for a flat lawn, and I'm getting a flat lawn. Your drainage issues sound like a you problem. Maybe you should invest in some sandbags." "It's not a me problem," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "It's a physics problem. And legally, you can't alter the natural flow of surface water to the detriment of the downhill estate. It's in the county code." He smirked, dismissing me with a wave of his hand. "I have lawyers who eat county codes for breakfast. Get off my property." "Okay, Brad." Message received. He filled in the ditch. He didn't just fill it in. He graded his entire backyard to slope aggressively toward the property line we shared. He put in a massive patio, a pool deck, and a 6-car driveway. It was an impervious surface nightmare. The first winter, it wasn't a total disaster, but it was bad. My backyard turned into a swamp. The ferns drowned. My dog came in looking like a mud monster every day. The water was sheeting off his massive, impervious lawn and dumping directly onto my land. It was eroding the soil around my favorite maple trees. I documented everything. Photos, timestamps, rainfall data. I even set up a trail camera pointing at the property line to capture the flow during storms. I knew this was coming. I could feel it in my bones. Then came the letter. Brad wasn't happy that my yard, now a swamp because of his runoff, looked unsightly from his master bedroom balcony. Apparently, seeing mud ruined his morning espresso experience. He actually had the audacity to complain about the mess he created. He sent a demand letter through his lawyer. A real nasty one. It was on thick, expensive letterhead that probably cost more than my car. It cited a local ordinance, Ordinance 14B, which states, property owners must maintain their land in a manner that prevents soil erosion and nuisance flooding. The letter demanded that I immediately cease and desist allowing stormwater to create a nuisance condition and construct necessary barriers to prevent erosion near the property line. Essentially, he was blaming me for the water he was sending down and demanding I build a wall to hide the mud. He wanted a view buffer. He wanted me to pay for a wall so he wouldn't have to look at the consequences of his own bad engineering. I read the letter. Then I poured myself a drink. Then I read it again. Then I read Ordinance 14.b and 14.c, and specifically 14.d. Ordinance 14.d says, a property owner has the right to protect their improvements from surface water by constructing retaining walls or berms, provided such structures do not exceed 6 feet in height and are engineered to withstand hydrostatic pressure. He wanted a barrier? I would give him a barrier. But I wouldn't just build a fence. I was going to build a dam. I hired a surveyor, my buddy Dave. We mapped the property line to the millimeter. I didn't want to give Brad a single inch of ground to complain about. We found the old iron pins buried under the mud Brad had pushed over. Then I designed the Great Wall of Malicious Compliance. It was a 4-foot-thick, steel-reinforced concrete retaining wall, faced with beautiful river rock. It ran the entire length of the property line. It was stunning. It was expensive. It was overkill in every possible way. But here is the kicker, and this is the part that matters. I waterproofed the uphill side. Usually, when you build a retaining wall, you put weep holes or drainage pipes at the bottom to let water pass through so it doesn't build up pressure behind the wall. You want the water to drain out so the wall doesn't collapse. But Brad's lawyer had demanded I prevent nuisance flooding on my property. He specifically asked for a barrier to stop the erosion. If I let the water through, I'd be violating his demand. I would be letting his nuisance water onto my land. So, I engineered the wall to hold back the Atlantic Ocean. I used high-si concrete. I installed a rubberized waterproof membrane on the back. I essentially built the hull of a ship, but made of rock. I applied for the permits. The county clerk looked at the plans, looked at me and asked, "Why do you need a Class 5 retaining wall for a backyard? This looks like something you'd see on a highway." I showed her Brad's lawyer's letter demanding necessary barriers. She read it, looked at the survey showing Brad's grade, and a slow smile spread across her face. She stamped it. Approved. Have a nice day. Construction took 3 weeks. Cost me $40,000. That is a lot of money. I had to dip into my savings. I had to take out a small line of credit. But I viewed it as an investment in entertainment. Brad saw the wall going up. He actually stood on his balcony, holding a glass of wine, and smirked at me. He thought he'd won. He thought he'd bullied the poor neighbor into landscaping his yard to improve the view. He yelled down, "Looks good. About time you cleaned that mess up." I just waved. He had no idea he was looking at the side of his own bathtub. November came, and with it, the Pineapple Express. For those not from the West Coast, An atmospheric river is basically a fire hose from the tropics connected directly to the sky over Washington state. It's warm, heavy rain that melts the snow in the mountains and floods the valleys. The forecast called for 6 inches of rain in 24 hours. The rain started on a Tuesday evening. By Wednesday morning, it was hammering against the windows like gravel. The sky was a bruised purple color. I sat in my living room, drinking coffee, watching the rain. My yard? Bone dry. The wall was doing exactly what Brad asked. It was preventing any of his water from entering my property. Up the hill, however, physics was collecting a debt. With the natural drainage ditch gone, filled in by Brad's ego, and my wall acting as an impermeable dam, the water had nowhere to go. Couldn't go down the hill because of my wall. Couldn't soak into the ground because of his massive concrete patios. Pooled. Then it rose. Then it reached his patio. I put on my raincoat and walked out to the wall. I climbed a ladder on my side just to peek over. It was biblical. Brad's pristine, flat backyard was a lake. The water was brown, swirling, and angry. His expensive outdoor wicker furniture was floating like little rafts. I saw his customized solo stove bobbing up and down like a buoy, and the water was rising toward his sliding glass doors. I saw Brad running around in the rain in his pajamas, frantically trying to, scoop the water away with a bucket. It was pitiful. It was like trying to empty the Titanic with a teaspoon. He was soaked, his hair plastered to his forehead, screaming at the sky. He saw me. He froze. Then he screamed. I couldn't hear the words over the roar of the rain, but I saw the veins popping in his neck. He pointed at the wall. He gestured for me to knock it down. He was miming a sledgehammer. He wanted me to breach the hull. I just smiled, gave him a thumbs up, and shouted, "Just following orders, Brad. Keeping the nuisance off my land." I went back inside to make toast. By noon, the water breached his threshold. By 2 p.m., his finished basement, where he kept his home theater and, I assume, his collection of unread business books, was fully submerged. The pressure of the water against his foundation caused a blowout. I heard the crack from my house. It sounded like a gunshot. That was the sound of a foundation wall giving way to hydrostatic pressure. He sued me, of course. He didn't even wait for the water to recede. He sued me for illegal diversion of water, nuisance, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and damages. He wanted $2.5 million. He claimed my wall was a spite structure designed specifically to destroy his home. Which brings us back to the courtroom. The trial was 6 months later. Brad looked terrible. He had lost weight. He looked tired. His lawyer, however, was sleek, loud, and completely unprepared for the concept of malicious compliance. His lawyer spent an hour painting me as a villain. He called me a menace. He called me a vandal. He showed pictures of Brad's ruined basement, the mold, the cracked foundation. He argued that I had a duty of care to let the water pass. My lawyer stood up. He didn't yell. He was an older guy, wore a tweed jacket. He simply placed 2 documents on the judge's bench. Exhibit A. The before survey showing the natural drainage easement that Brad had filled in without a permit. Exhibit B. The demand letter from Brad's lawyer, insisting I build a barrier to stop the water. Your Honor, my lawyer said, his voice calm, my client simply did what he was told. He was ordered to contain the water. He contained it. The fact that the plaintiff illegally altered the grade of his own land, removing the only escape route for that water, is unfortunate. But it is not my client's liability. We complied with his demand to the letter. The judge looked at the survey. He adjusted his glasses. He looked at the demand letter. He looked at Brad. Mr. Plaintiff, the judge said, peering over his spectacles. Let me get this straight. You filled in a drainage ditch. You paved 3 acres. And then you ordered your neighbor to build a wall so you wouldn't have to look at the runoff you created. Brad stuttered. I didn't think he'd build a dam. I thought he'd build a fence. A wooden fence. He built a code-compliant retaining wall, the judge corrected, tapping the permit I had submitted, pursuant to your written demand, and according to the county report. The judge flipped a page, and the room got very quiet. You never pulled a grading permit for your backyard work. Is that correct? Silence. The judge leaned forward. Ignorance of the law is not a defense, specifically when you are the one weaponizing it. The gavel didn't bang. It just tapped. A soft sound that signaled the end of Brad's financial future. Case dismissed with prejudice. But we weren't done. I countersued. I sued for the cost of the wall, $40,000. I argued that since he demanded the barrier, and his illegal grading necessitated it, he should pay for it. I sued for my legal fees, and, thanks to a little-known statute regarding interference with historic easements and timber trespass, for the trees he killed with his initial runoff, I sued for damages. The court found that by filling in the easement, Brad had committed a willful trespass. In our state, that triggers something called treble damages, triple the cost of restoration. Since Brad had altered a historic easement without a permit, the county got involved. They fined him for the illegal grading, $10,000 a day until it was fixed. They ordered him to restore the easement. That meant he had to rip up his patio. He had to rip up his pool deck. He had to tear out his 6-car driveway. He effectively had to destroy all the improvements he had made. And the house? Since the basement flooded and the foundation cracked, the certificate of occupancy was revoked. It was condemned until repairs could be made. Repairs that would cost more than the house was worth. The bank foreclosed 6 months later. I bought the foreclosure. Well, not me personally. My LLC bought it. For pennies on the dollar. The bank just wanted it off their books. We tore down the monstrosity. Felt good to watch it come down. We restored the natural grade. The ferns are coming back. The drainage ditch is flowing beautifully again. The frogs have returned. I kept the wall, though. It's a nice wall. Sometimes, I go out there with a cup of coffee on a rainy morning. I run my hand along the cold river rock. Feels solid. Feels like justice. Brad moved back to the city. I heard he's renting a condo now. Hopefully on a high floor. I doubt he'll be asking his neighbors to build any walls anytime soon. Competence is the only defense against chaos. Brad had money, but he didn't have physics on his side. He tried to use the law as a bludgeon, but he forgot that a sword has 2 edges. He wanted a wall. He got a wall, and he paid for it with his empire. What do you think? Was I too harsh, or did he drown in his own hubris? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this verdict, leave a like. It helps the channel and it costs you absolutely nothing, unlike Brad's renovation. Stay stoic, stay sharp, and always read the bylaws. See you in the next one.